given the fact that you had suppliers all over the world, right? Really fragmented market. So yes, I understand that, if you highlight some of the success stories, you might be able to get others, but you didn't have a one place where you could go and get all the suppliers and fragment it all over. How did you manage to do that? Was it all internet based, or how? I mean, what were the tools that you used?
Yeah, I think. Well, fortunately, there are a lot of fora, messaging boards, groups, organizations. So there'll be like a design group, there'll be a writers association, there'll be a designers association, and so on. So we'd go after many of these places, because see, it's not just getting somebody to register, right? They have to be active, they have to be responsive. If somebody submits a request and then they don't respond, I mean, that's as good as not being there, just because their name is there. I mean, any of you who use job sites, right? I mean, okay, there's millions of resumes, but are they even current? Are they updated? Are they real? Are they looking for a job? Are they going to respond, etc.? And I think that becomes a real problem. So, so finding them was not hard. They're very easily accessible because they're always looking, learning. So there's training areas, and there's lists and guilds and associations and so on. It wasn't so much the finding part as it was the screening part. The challenge actually was the reverse. If 1 million people show up, you really don't, firstly you don't need 1 million, a few 100,000 or even like few tens of thousands would be just fine. Secondly, you want the best of them, or relatively high quality ones, and you want the responsive ones, right? The responsible ones who ensure a successful transaction, people who are familiar with doing global business and interacting and communicating with other people and so on. So I think it was actually a different problem, where on the provider side we had to screen it to ensure a good experience, while on the buyer side just acquire more of them and bring them on board.
So it was more about creating trust between the two parties, right? Because ultimately you were the custodian for both the sides.
That's right, ensuring successful outcomes. Yeah, in fact, so it was, honestly, I don't really like the word marketplace, because marketplace simply implies matching, and matching is not even sort of 10 or 20% of the success factor, right? So yeah, you find somebody, but then guess what? Then the work begins. You're going to spend anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months or longer working on the project, and that's where a lot of things break. So to ensure successful outcomes after the initial matching is where, so we'd call it, okay, there's the marketplace, but there's also a workplace, and it's part of the whole platform. So in the workplace, like I said, we'd have templates and, a directory area where people can share documents, and they can review it and preview work. They can check off milestones and invoicing and billing and tracking and managing all the projects and messaging back and forth and making all that easy. So we had to, I guess in a regular marketplace you call it settlement, but out here the fulfillment and settlement was actually a very complex part of the equation, but that's where if you didn't do that right, then the matching would not be useful enough. Yeah.
There were several other people who tried coming in and doing the similar stuff. What did it take for Elance to continue being number one?
Lots of things. I think lots of work, a little bit of luck, plenty of issues. You're right. So it became, see, once a space becomes hot, then you get a lot of people wanting to do the same thing, getting into that space as well. And then you say, and there's multiple success factors, right? It's not just what's happening with the product and the business, but also funding. Do you have adequate funding to keep the marketing going and so on? So we, in fact, after the seed round, then we raised like 12 million, the KP round was 12 million. Then very quickly we went and did another $50 million round after that as well. And these were the boom years of the net. So, it was relatively easier, not easy, it's never easy, but you could do that, right? I mean, in fact, fortunately we just did that in mid 2000. I mean, maybe 6 months later it would have been impossible after the bubble burst. So one is, so it's a lot of factors, right? Sometimes, again, I find a lot of young entrepreneurs saying, okay, if you're just smarter or work harder and so on, no, that's not enough, right? I think funding, your funding strategy is just as important a part of it. You have enough, firepower to, or ability to survive, enough of a runway to get to where you want to be, to be able to persist. So one is, we raised a good amount of money. The other was we didn't spend it all very quickly. Some companies did, famously pets.com and so on. I don't know if you even remember some of those examples, but some of them had massive kind of ATL campaigns, marketing campaigns, where you burn a lot of cash and run out of it very quickly. So we didn't do any of that. We sort of waited, and also we'd grown up the team a little bit, so we cut back fairly aggressively, which is again another one of those very hard things to do as an entrepreneur, right? You hire somebody and then 6, 12 or 18 months later you just have to say, well, sorry, it's unfortunate, circumstances have changed, and it's difficult because it has personal impact and it has it affects people's lives and their careers and so on. But the alternative is it kills the company, and these are very, very hard choices. So we cut back. We also, for a time, we focused on, as the consumer or the small business model was taking time, we in fact built out an enterprise product and sold it to large enterprises, and were fortunate enough to, well, we ended up selling to GE, BP, FedEx, TI, a whole bunch of, about 20 of the Fortune 100 companies, fairly large companies and so on, which brought some revenues and helped us survive and last long as well. So it's kind of funny. I mean, startups and companies in the space, I mean, you can die for any one of 100 reasons, right? Any one of them can kill you, and you just need all of them to kind of go right for you to succeed or survive, even, and so on. So I think I think we, I mean, it's safe to say we made a ton of mistakes. We made, had a ton of challenges. I don't know if I can call them mistakes, but with hindsight, I think the circumstances were different and you sort of do certain things. But I think we kept at it. You sort of always keep saying, you keep looking, so long as you're building value, as you're sort of helping customers, as you're driving, customers keep using your product and they keep coming back, and you keep improving your business model and so on. Ultimately, investors will come and support it over time, and so that's what helped us survive. But basically, just products like this live and die by their. Companies like this live and die by their products. If the products are good and if the customers like it, so you always focus on, okay, what are the friction points? What is not working? Where is the conversion rate dropping? What is it that they like? Can we do more of that? Can we get better? So a lot of blocking and tackling, a lot of perseverance, simply not giving up. Those are the things that, and many others in the space, I think, just stumbled for a variety of reasons. That,
And then, what made you leave Alliance, exit Alliance, and start all over again? I guess it was all going pretty well, isn't it?
Yeah, yes and no. I think, so Elance was doing well, right? I think even though the bubble had burst and it took Elance about 6-9 months to adjust and then sort of scale up. So at one point, it went too far into the enterprise sales model. Now, I had no enterprise sales experience or background, so we had hired another CEO at that time to lead the effort on the enterprise side, and he was doing more and more of that. And it's I was at Elance in an operating role for about 6-7 years in aggregate. So I was there for quite a lot of time, but at some point it got a little tiring where with enterprises, just a different skill set, okay? Some people are good at it, some people can deal with it, but these are conservative businesses, complex sales cycle, can be long. Decision making is again very complex for a variety of reasons. You have to manage the politics in the organization, but ultimately if they buy, there's a lot of revenue as well. Honestly, I was more interested in building consumer businesses that normal regular people, individual consumers can use, and at least that was my personal preference. So that was the time around which I left Elance in an operating role. I still am on the board, but I'm not active there, of course. In fact, the irony of it is Elance ultimately kind of gave up on the enterprise model as well, because I think there were a bunch of other things. Oracle was consolidating the whole enterprise software space, and at that time, it was just also there was a transition from license software model to software as a service, SaaS model and so on. So I think net, it didn't look like that was a huge opportunity, and they came back to today. It's sort of back to what we started with, which is just an online platform, so that's continued. And it's doing well today. It does about $250 million worth of transaction volume. Elance keeps about 10% of it, give or take. And but the growth rate is immense. I think in a couple of years it may be touching $1 billion in transaction value, and sort of, I guess, 10% of that would be its revenue. So as it takes off, I think globally it just transforms the way, like I was saying, the vision that we had back then, I think finally kind of coming true. Sometimes it takes a lot longer for businesses to succeed, and a lot of hard work, but you just kind of have to keep at it. But that's how I started thinking about, okay, what next, how do we do it, and that's where we came to Webaroo and Gupshup.
Webaroo also had a very interesting start, right? It started off as an offline search model, right? And today it's completely different. So it has changed as the time went by, right? So if you can, elaborate more about where you started and what was the rationale behind that, and how you changed over a period of time.
Yeah, I think the way I describe it is, the shortest path to success is not a straight line. It's actually a very crooked line. Okay, it's no different. Let's say you're climbing a mountain. You don't say, okay, there's the peak, and I'm going to walk in a straight line and climb the mountain. That doesn't make sense. You kind of, you say, okay, wait a minute. Here's the approach path, and there's a ridge, and maybe we can walk along that. And you kind of zigzag your way ultimately to where you want to go. And a startup life is not very different from that. You have your hunch or your initial intuition, your version 1 of the product, and you sort of you develop the product and you build it out. Except that no marketing plan survives first contact with the customer, right? And when you do that, that's when a lot of things change. You get real feedback, and you have to deal with it and adapt with it, and so on. And so again, with Webaroo, initially we were sort of developing a smartphone product before the smartphone category was even there, and we expected it to grow a lot faster. I think storage was growing very rapidly and so on, so we expected that to happen a lot quicker. And sometimes you can't really time them. You anticipate it, and then it takes longer or slower, and so on. So I think we started with something, but then realized, okay, the real mobile landscape in emerging markets or in India is the fact that most people have simpler phones, they're basic phones, right? This was about 2006, 2007. And how do you deliver content and information on a regular feature phone? And the only way to do that is with SMS and voice. So if you want to build any product, like say, okay, we'll build an internet product, not for, let's say 10 million users in Bombay or Delhi at that time, but for the mass market. And the only way, right, really the only way is to do it through SMS. So we said, okay, we want to go build a consumer product that really affects lots and lots of people, and we'll deliver content through SMS. And where does the content come from? So we said, well, user generated. That's the simplest way. People can create their own content and share it with their friends. So we created this group messaging platform that allows anyone to create a group or to join a group really easily. And the real innovation was just making it very simple and very easy. We didn't say, hey, go to the web, fill out a registration form. That didn't make sense, right? Because, well, the web population itself was not that big, and so on. But just by sending a single SMS, join followed by group name, you can subscribe to the group, and then whenever the creator of the group sends a message, they would send it to Gupshup. Gupshup would forward it to all the subscribers in the group. It's sort of like Twitter, and it came about at almost the same time, but from an independent sort of thought process. So that's how we created this platform, and we were, our initial product had failed. We were working with sort of a couple of different ideas. One was this thing, was another sort of mobile client we were also building for J2ME devices and so on. But so with Gupshup, we just told, with this group messaging platform, we just told our employees saying, hey, create a group and invite your friends, okay? And there were like, 100 employees, and half of them didn't even listen, but the other half that did, maybe they invited like 10 or 20 friends, and by the end of the month, there were like 1,000 users, and the end of the second month, there were like 10,000 users, right? And 30,000, and then 1,00,000 users, and so on. And once you see that kind of growth, and then you say, wow, there's something crazy, something magical, it's a rare phenomenon. I mean, rarely do you have products that have this kind of growth, right? We were doing zero marketing. It was all word of mouth, all viral, and people were just coming onto it in very, very large numbers. And when you look at the growth rate, I remember sometimes it was like 1-2% per day, okay, which sounds small, except when you compound it over the whole year, it's like about 300x, which means in about 2 years you run out of all the people in the world, okay. So you're like, obviously it can't grow that quickly, but it's amazing. I mean, this is one of those outlier phenomena that doesn't happen simply and easily. But we saw that growing very, very quickly. So that's when we said, okay, got to double down on this, got to focus on this. Let's figure out how to get it to grow fast, keep supporting the product. And then in fact, a year later, it became a different problem. In fact, it was growing so fast and there was so much messaging, right, that we were subsidizing all of this. So it's sort of like, okay, how do we keep subsidizing at an exponential growth rate? So you have an expense line that's growing exponentially. You have no revenues whatsoever. And so, that's when we had to scramble. I mean, a bunch of different things. One is we negotiated with operators saying, look, your rate card doesn't make sense. Ultimately, it's a capex kind of fixed expense kind of thing. Why the hell are you, they had per message rate cards, except, the highest volume was like 10,000 and we were already like at 100 million. And we're like, look, something's wrong here. And ultimately, the incremental cost of sending a message is close to zero at high scale, right? So clearly, I think, so firstly, some of the unit prices came down very, very rapidly. We had to scramble for funding and so on, so we got some of that things done. And then lastly, we had to also figure out how to monetize it quickly, so that's when we got businesses to start marketing on the platform and drive some revenue so that we can continue to feed the community, which is still growing rapidly. So finally today it's about 60-65 million users, and that's, we still limit it, okay? It's a difficult part of the space that we are in, but in spite of limiting our own growth, it's at 60 million users, so it could have been twice that maybe, if we didn't do that, which is easily, the largest sort of social media property in India. So it's grown fairly rapidly. We've also been monetizing it reasonably well, and that's kind of where we are.
So how did you manage to sustain this over a period of time while you were growing exponentially, which was a purely free model, right? And you had to pay to the operator, right?
Yeah, so I think, I touched upon some of the things, but to elaborate, so firstly, of course, just junking the rate card and saying, okay, let's negotiate volume capacity. We'll just rent capacity from you. It's cheaper for us to set up an SMSC than to keep paying you per message. So, just let's figure out a sensible way to price it. That's one part of it. The other part of it was, there was a phase, I remember, about 6 months where we had to delay payments to vendors, saying, okay, we will pay you, but we don't have money right now. But you can't stop either, because then we might never pay you. So, which was fairly difficult conversations at that point in time. We had to bridge finance the business, which is getting sort of temporary loans, a month or 2 months at a time. All the while we are talking to investors to do a funding round. Meanwhile, Bear Stearns has collapsed, right? This is 2008 now, and Lehman is about to collapse, and investors are about to freak out completely at the financial markets. But fortunately, we closed. So this way again, the funding sort of strategy, and look, it's a hit or miss thing. There's no guarantee, right? So you have to talk to a dozen people or 2 dozen people, as the case may be, and shortlist it and figure it out. So all of that takes time, no matter what the business is sometimes. And meanwhile, like I said, I mean, we just operated it, as creatively. That took a lot of creativity, a lot of persuasion, a lot of, even employees are worried, right? Are you going to be able to meet payroll next month or not? Are we going to shut down? What are we doing? So you're dealing with employees, you're dealing with vendors, you're dealing with operators, you're dealing with investors. So it just takes just a lot of persuasion, getting everybody to see the big picture. It's like, okay, fine, there's a problem now, but we'll overcome it. But honestly, it was a good problem to have, right? It's the business was growing, the user base was growing, so at least there's something good. It's like, okay, fine, we have to figure out the funding, but that'll fall in place, and so on. So I think that was a tricky phase. And then later on, I think as we started monetizing, even there was a lot of learning to be done, right? How do you sell it? Who do you sell it to? Who would buy? Who's a recurring customer, not a one-time customer? What are the margins of the business? How can you grow it, and so on. So there was a lot of trial and error that happened in that phase as well. But it's been a roller coaster ride, that's for sure. I think most startups are. The highs are high, the lows are low, and so on. But we've grown the community tremendously. It's continuously engaged. We've been monetizing it reasonably well, and in fact we have some very exciting and phenomenal new products coming out as well that will take it to a whole new level.
For sure that you created some very unique products like CRM and all that for small businesses, but I would want to hold on to that because we'll possibly have some of that discussed tomorrow in the CC marketing panel. I think that is some of it more useful.
Right. No, I don't think along those lines, but the bigger point I was making was, look, mobile in India itself is changing, right? Finally, smartphones and mobile data is arriving, even though with a phase lag with the rest of the world. So a lot of people, right? I mean, how many of you are carrying smartphones? Right? I mean, just look at that, right? The majority of the room has smartphones, and I'm guessing data connections as well. So consequently, right, see, this is another one of those, I won't say a U-turn, but a sort of turn in the road where, our initial assumption, which was valid then and helped us grow, it no longer holds, right? That the fact that everybody would receive messages as SMS because that's the only way to do it. Well, there's a whole new medium and another transformation coming through, right? We may have, there's what, maybe give or take 50 million mobile web users going to 300 or 400 million mobile web users. Not just smartphones, but even smarter feature phones, right? There are some amazing devices from Nokia and so on coming out where, for as low as 3,000, 4,000 rupees, it's full touch screen and data capability and so on. So given that, okay, we are also expanding our product and launching a mobile app, a Gupshup app. I think it'll be out literally in a couple of weeks across all platforms, Android, iOS, BlackBerry, Symbian, and so on, Series 40 and MediaTek. And that'll allow us, right, so it'll be the communities that we've built already. Now you can access it on the app itself. So it's sort of like the Twitter app, if you will, as well as sort of small group messaging, kind of like WhatsApp, but it's sort of seamlessly integrated, as well as it interoperates with SMS, which means, think about it today, how many of you use either BBM or WhatsApp or any of these services, right? Again, many of you, right? Except that like BBM only works with other BlackBerry users, right? With your BlackBerry friends. WhatsApp only works with your WhatsApp friends, right? Meaning if they haven't downloaded the app, you can't send them a message. So it's not truly ubiquitous, right? And what we are going to do is have it interoperate with SMS, which means if the person has not downloaded the app, then they'll receive an SMS and can reply by SMS, but you see it on data. So in that sense, the entire contact book can be reached using our app, and essentially it includes free SMS. I mean, we'll subsidize it. So where other people have data, you can reach on data. If they don't have data, then it'll be on SMS, and it'll be, plus of course the mobile communities and all that is kind of rolled into it. So in that sense, you got to keep innovating, right? Like I said, it's not a straight road. You have to adjust, but we are launching what we hope or expect would be sort of a killer messaging app that'll be very, very useful, you know. So all of you, little plug, please use it. But we'll see. I mean, again, there's a lot of iteration. We have to see how it works and keep improving it and so on. But it's very, very exciting times, you know, in this space. Yeah.
I think the most interesting part that, if you look at the entire journey, is that you have always kept innovating, and the fact is that at each of these, if I could say, inflection points, you have come up with something new, possibly gone back to what you started off with. In this case, again, you're going back to a smartphone, which you started off with,
right.
And in Alliance, you started off with a pure consumer business, if I can use that terminology, rather than an enterprise business.
Right.
So you're again going back to the same thing, and most importantly, I guess you have just kept innovating at each and every step, right?
Yeah, I think you know, the only constant is change. I mean, like they say, and look, timing is everything. Okay, sometimes there's no such thing as a bad idea or a good idea. It just, you know, the idea lives in the context of the environment and the circumstance and the user, you know, sort of familiarity with products and so on. Like say there were, you know, Friendster was probably a great idea, except it died, and then, you know, Facebook succeeded. But to do photo sharing in 2003 was really, really hard. You know, to do it in 2007 is just phenomenally easy. Okay, you know, to build smartphone apps in 2007 was like crazy. To do it in 2011 and 12 makes sense, right? So I think a lot of, you know, to me, it's an interesting dichotomy, right? As an entrepreneur, you have to have a lot of passion, a lot of commitment and conviction, right? Which means you say, okay, I have an idea and I'm excited about it, I'm going to do it, and even though everybody says, no, it's a crazy idea, I'm going to kind of do it, okay? Which is fine. I mean, that's what it takes to get started. And then, you know, so you can ignore virtually everybody else, except you can't ignore your customers, right? So then your customers, when you put version 1 out, and then your customers react and say, okay, well, this is fine, but that's not exactly good, or modify it, change it, and oh, it doesn't work on my phone, or what do I do with it, and etc., etc. So at that point, I think you also need the nimbleness and the flexibility, and I might even say the intellectual humility to say, okay, well, you know, it's different. I mean, you know, so it's a very tricky and delicate combination of, you need strong opinions that are loosely held, okay? You need strong conviction, but when confronted with solid data, which may even contradict your prior conviction, you have to adjust, you have to tack. Sometimes the assumptions change, sometimes the environment changes, but every company, I mean, even would you consider successful companies, I mean, Microsoft is constantly evolving. I mean, they succeeded with desktop, then struggled with web, now making a fight for mobile, okay? Google succeeded with the web while struggling with social, right? And succeeded with mobile to some extent. I think there's, you know, Facebook is paranoid about, you know, Google and patents and other things. So it's not simple. I mean, there's no easy answers, and you're just always sort of finding your way to sort of optimize. You know, you have some vision, you have to have clear vision, but you need the flexibility along the way and the perseverance to keep at it, because it's, you know, like I said, constant, it's always changing. And in this tech field, it's so dynamic, both the platforms and the paradigms are changing, the competitive dynamic is so rapid that it just, you know, got to keep doing that.
Great. I think we'll close it here, but we'll just open it to questions. Do we have mics around here? Anyone with mics over here?
I think if
anyone could have a question, you can possibly walk in front, take a front seat, and you can ask a question. Otherwise, Beerud is going to be around tomorrow as well in the second half, and we have a huge shout fest outside, which you don't see anything right now, but tomorrow morning you'll realize it's transformed to a different place altogether. And we would certainly ensure that Beerud is out to answer any question that you may have.
If you were to restart your whole enterprise again, what was mistakes you would like to avoid?
So, honestly, I don't like to think of them as mistakes. I think they were learning opportunities that helped me get where I am, in the sense that, I mean, think about it, right? Humans are, all of us are hardwired to learn from mistakes, right? Right from when you were a child and took the first step, you didn't learn to walk, you learned not to fall, right? You say, oh, oops, if I don't put my second leg in front of the first one, my head will hurt. So I got to do that, and ultimately you call it learning, and then you walk. Or in school, or in college, you go through, at the beginning of the semester, you know nothing. If you took the test, you would fail. Everybody would fail. But then you study, you prepare, you reduce your mistakes, and by the end of the semester, they call it education. And why is it called mistakes and failures when you look at it in real life? So to me, these were, think of it this way, okay? It's completely dark. There's a terrain, and there's obstacles, and there's rocks and places that you need to avoid, and you need to get from here to there, and you're walking and you bump into something. Okay, was that a mistake? Well, maybe I shouldn't have gone there, but then you didn't know any better anyway, right? So yeah, you use some intuition, you use your hunches, and you go down a certain path, and then you learn, think, oops, can't do that because X, Y, and Z, and therefore let me change course, and they go this way and they go this way. So honestly, I don't think I'd change anything different. The only thing you can do as an entrepreneur is to say, okay, just stay balanced. Saying, am I taking in all the information that I'm getting and doing the right thing? And every time something goes wrong, you learn from it and say, okay, how do I get better at it? So I think it's really, it just needs to be a very different perspective. So I don't think I can say I'd change anything, because then I wouldn't be where I am either.
Having succeeded in the first venture, Elance, how difficult is it to come down on the ground and, as an entrepreneur, connect with the customers as opposed to when it was earlier in Elance?
Oh, not difficult at all, because honestly, for me personally, that's what I love, right? Ultimately, real customers and real consumers giving real feedback is what's exciting. So every opportunity or every chance I get, I'll, we'll talk to customers, and I'll not use my business card and forget titles and so on. You want the customers to talk to you and give you real feedback, and putting away all this pretense of role and title and organization. All that is kind of just, I think most entrepreneurs don't give a damn about any of that. Ultimately, look, I have a cool thing, I want you to use it. Either please use it and thank me for it, or tell me why you don't like it, from which I can learn and make it better. Okay, that's it. Everything else is just noise,
Hello. At what point during a startup do you actually decide to go in for venture funding?
So I think it's a longer conversation, but I would say, look, right when you're starting out, you have nothing except an idea. It just makes sense to raise money from friends and family who trust you because of who you are, than because of what the idea is, and so on. Then if you get it to a certain milestone, which makes your business model more credible, more believable, you've taken out what's called some of the risk factors, meaning you've tested it with 5, 10 or 100 customers and they like it. You've built version 1 of the technology and you've solved all the key problems there. You've hired a core team of people, so you've solved some of the execution risk. I think most VCs would look at these 3, 4 things and say, okay, when you've gotten past some of these milestones, that's when they need to raise money. But sometimes the obvious answer is simply, when you need it. If you run out of it and you need to go raise it, that's when you got to do. So I think it's always a challenge. Make sure that with the seed money, it gets you to a point where you've achieved enough milestones to answer those questions so that you can get the venture funds. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Just wanted to understand, is it your conviction too that an entrepreneur should definitely invest some amount of his savings into a business?
No, I don't think so.
All right,
Uh,
thanks.
I mean, I think you're investing your reputation, your career, your time, your sweat. If you can, you should invest your money, but to me it doesn't mean anything one way or another because you're making a far greater investment or commitment of other things. Yeah.
Beerud, you did Elance, and you had a lot of word of mouth marketing. Same with happened with SMS Gupshup. So, but when you see in India, audience development happens primarily through TV and all. What's your view on that? Can you create a consumer internet space
Sure.
without, spending too much money in India?
Look, before there was the internet, before there was mobile, the US or worldwide was no different, right? The only way to get word of mouth was through print and TV. It's just that when these communication technologies that people could use and consume very easily, so email through Hotmail and then many other products as well, that's when viral came about more recently, right? So it happened on web, it's happening on mobile as well. I think if I can just make one major level point, right? India has never been connected. We've had barely 30, 50 million users, mobile web users, which is less than 3 or 5% of the population of the country. It's only now over the last year that it's getting closer to 100, depending on what numbers you look at. But mobile, for the first time, it's a platform the whole country, is connected. 600 to 900 million mobile subs, whatever you count. So the point is, it's absolutely possible. It's possible on mobile. In fact, I think that's the only medium on which you can drive viral. And I think we've done it successfully, but there'll be, I think, many other companies to follow as well.
I think we'll close the session here today. We've already run out of time, and as I said, Beerud is going to be around tomorrow in the second half. So feel free to meet him and ask as many questions. Please remember, this is going to be purely informal, unconference. So if you see him wherever, you could actually get hold of him and ask him a question, as long as no time for him to be on the panel here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
As a token of appreciation, we give on behalf of Beerud, we have given a small donation to Midday scheme, and here's a letter for that. Thank you, Beerud. Thanks everyone, and see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Thank you.